One of the great services that Steve Rogers and his best friend Bucky Barnes provided is that when one of them left, they would take all the stupid with them. It's very thoughtful. Lost down the list of superpowers that were granted to Steve Rogers thanks to Dr. Erskine's formula is the power that he had all along. The power to form meaningful and lasting friendships. His century-long friendship with Bucky Barnes even survived a few decades of Barnes being a brainwashed murder machine. It stands to reason that he would let his best pal in on his complicated retirement plans. Avengers Endgame was a lot of undoing and redoing, and not always in that order. Half of the MCU had been wiped out, including a bunch of characters we just met. That number included both Steve Rogers' blast-from-the-past pal Bucky Barnes and his friend from the future Sam Wilson. For 5 years, he lived up to the memory of the two people the living icon considered peers by running group sessions for people who needed to talk about life after half of everyone blinked out of existence. Little did we know that there were people during that time going, "This is awesome!" Not everyone who remembered what once was into the big undo. Not enough for Thanos to be able to enjoy that sun setting on a grateful universe. But then, that's not how universes and suns work. Taking the Big Chin down was a group effort that involved fast-tracking a lot of things that had been in a slow burn development since he ran out into Times Square and found it a lot more electric than the last time he left it. His fallout with Tony had to get worse before it got better. He also had to come to terms with time traveling after effectively having been a man who time traveled into the future. He was able to lead the team into undoing the snap only to come dangerously close to losing all over again. He found out, or revealed, depending on whether or not he was faking it during their after-party in Ultron, that he was worthy of Mjolnir. It was a lot. Steve had only been in the future for a couple of months, coming to terms with people who turn into rage monsters and armored power suits built by your friend's kid, and the literal Norse god of thunder when he also got to come to terms with a completely for-real alien invasion. With Orson Welles' adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds being probably one of the only alien invasion stories Steve would have known about, you have to wonder if he at least briefly thought of sneezing on one of the Chitauri just to see if the common cold would kill them. Turns out it was easier than that. You just have to take out the mothership. With all of that weighing on old Steve's mind, it's easy to see how a trip through time and space could be rejiggered to end not back in the future, but instead back in time, getting that dance he missed when he nosedived a plane during World War II. It's understandable that he might not tell his teammates about it, seeing as they just lost Tony Stark, and with everyone coming back all at once, the world might need the kind of leadership Cap delivers. On the other hand, retiring after saving literally half of all life seems pretty reasonable. One odd thing that did stand out was how sentimental Bucky was getting when Cap left. He tells Steve,
"I miss you, buddy. It's gonna be okay, Buck."
Someone seemed to know something. And, according to the directors Joe and Anthony Russo, knows something Bucky and Steve did. From that emotional farewell, even though Banner was saying that Steve would only be gone for a moment their time, to Bucky's seeming lack of surprise as an indicator that somehow, someway, Bucky knew Cap was going to make his way back to the future the slow way. Unlike the issue of whether or not Old Man Cap was hiding out in our timeline as Peggy's mystery husband, or if Cap's dance-related time shenanigans created a new reality, the writers and the directors are in agreement. Writer Stephen McFeely said during the Blu-ray commentary that the tip-off that Bucky knew was when he said that he'd miss Steve Rogers. Both writer and director, however, were not all that clear on what Bucky knew and when he knew it. He also seemed to know where Old Man Steve would show up, and that he'd likely have something very personal to tell Sam Wilson, who was very much not in on any of it, as he kept shouting to Bruce Banner to bring him back. You know it's intense when you start yelling at Bruce Banner. That's not generally a guy you like stressed out. Of course, what the director says, or even what the writer says, doesn't always mean that's what's going on. Notably, the directors and the writers disagree on what timeline Steve Rogers spent his retirement. Ridley Scott and Harrison Ford disagree strongly on the whole Deckard is a replicant argument. But then, Blade Runner 2049 suggests that Deckard was made explicitly to fall in love with the replicant Rachel. But the answer to what did Bucky know and when he knew it got a canonical answer in the 5th episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when the unfrozen mid-century assassin admitted to Sam Wilson that he and his unfrozen mid-century supersoldier friend didn't take into account the centuries of historical weight handing off the Captain America shield to a black man. In his apology, Buck reveals that Steve had talked to him about what he was going to do ahead of time. It was probably as much a goodbye to his literal oldest friend as much as a conversation about why Bucky wouldn't get it. Mostly because Bucky's best known as a programmed murder machine. There are still questions, as Steve is referred to in two contrary ways in the series. At the therapy session, Sam tells Bucky that he and Steve will have to accept that Sam was doing what he felt was right. That implies that Steve was around enough to be at least aware the shield was given up. But later, Sam outright says Steve is gone. The ultimate fate of Steve Rogers will likely be a mystery that plays out over the course of Phase 4. Of course, Torres thinks that Steve is living on the moon looking down on all of us. Which, is just crazy. The moon is where a race of uplifted humans live as a secret weapon left behind on Earth by aliens. What else would be up there, cheese?